Park. My name is Mike Fitz, and I'm the media ranger here at Katmai.
And I'm Roy Wood. I'm the Chief of Interpretation for Katmai National Park and Preserve. Today's program that we're going to do, we'll be doing from Brooks Falls inside the treehouse. It started raining this morning about 9 o'clock, and it hasn't really let up since. And since we have a lot of equipment, we knew there was no way that we could go out and do it at the falls. Things just don't work very well when they get wet. So fortunately, we have this nice spot here called the Treehouse, which is the staging area at Brooks Falls, before you go out to either the Riffles viewing platform or the Falls viewing platform. And since today's subject was on the big guys, we thought it was also very appropriate that we could do it next to this bear right here, who was nicknamed Diver.
And Roy, you said this cutout's 3/4 life size?
Yeah, I was looking through some notes. This exhibit was made before I got here, and I was looking through some notes on it, and they said that they wanted Diver to be 3/4 size because that was the biggest piece of that material that could be purchased. And so you can see coming up to Mike how tall he is, and imagine going another 25% larger. That was a big bear. But maybe not any bigger than the bears we have out here right now, right?
Might not be. Yeah, compared to a bear like 747 or 856, I mean, they're certainly going to be this tall at the shoulder. The biggest adult males that we have here will stand nearly 5 feet at the shoulder. And when they stand up on two legs, they can be almost 9 feet tall, some of those really, really large brown bears. Today we wanted to talk about a lot of the big brown bears that we find up at Brooks Falls, a lot of the real dominant males. We wanted to talk about dominance and the hierarchy and how that sort of works. It works differently for different bears. Size means a lot, but disposition means a lot too. And I think when you're watching the cams, you'll be able to really see pretty well just how each one of these bears fits into the hierarchy. And things get shuffled up when we get a new bear from time to time. And
which I think we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and that happened last week especially.
Yeah. If you're new to the chats, these are hosted on Explore.org's website. And what you need to do to ask us questions would be to scroll all the way to the bottom of the screen and go below where all the icons are for all of the other webcams. And you'll see a conversation that's going on there. Go ahead and ask your question there, and I know some of you already have been for the last hour or so, but ask your question there. And then today, Tess, who is our media intern, and some of you met her on a previous chat, much to her embarrassment. She's just off camera over here. She's monitoring the chat board, and she will feed us the questions again through the iPad. And we'll try to answer as many of them as possible. We tend to get to about 20 of them if we don't have too many technical difficulties and if we stay on topic. And as we said, today's topic would be on the large males and how they really dominate the falls.
And when we're looking at, I think even if people were taking an informal survey of how bears use the river, if you watch the lower river camera a lot and you watch the Brooks Falls camera a lot, you'll see just by noting the types of bears that you're seeing, the vast majority of the bears that you typically see up at Brooks Falls are going to be the really big adult males. Downstream in some of those other places, those are maybe less successful fishing spots. So you're going to find maybe smaller bears, females with cubs, and also those subadult bears, those bears that aren't fully mature yet. So dominance certainly confers a lot of advantages. If you're a big guy, you can defend a fishing spot up at Brooks Falls, and that can give you big profits in calories. And that's the whole point of them being here, is to gain energy.
Right. We didn't make it up last night, but we could see on the cams last night that it was pretty exciting up here. There were a lot of large males fishing. That sounded like there was some fighting at times. And we had just talked about this. Maybe that we're seeing a bit of a shift in the hierarchy. Do you want to detail what you're seeing? Maybe is a 747 moving up a little bit?
Yeah, I can kind of explain some of the things that I've seen.
Where's Lurch in all of this now?
So it shifts every year just a little bit. It can shift almost from day to day too, depending on if a bear's injured or a bear feels stronger and displaces a formerly dominant bear. Here at Brooks River over the past, 4 summers at least, 856 has been by far the most dominant bear. I've not noted a single instance where he's been displaced by another bear. Now, I'm not observing him 24 hours a day, So there could be another bigger bear in the area that we
Right.
don't know about. That's certainly a possibility. But when I'm up here at the falls on my off time, I just like to hang out and watch bears because it's enjoyable. But I also like to take a lot of notes. See me up here all the time scribbling things down, and I'm taking notes about who's interacting with who and which one sort of, I guess, quote unquote, wins any interactions. And 856 by far wins all the interactions that he's involved in, even with 747.
Right.
So he's top. And then we have a couple other bears. 747, who's also really, really big, just as fat as Diver here. So he's a really big bear right now. And then we have 814 Lurch, who's also really dominant. Those are probably the three largest bears that we have here. So, I mean, it makes sense that they would be on the top of the hierarchy.
I think one of the more fascinating things to see with 856 is how he will stop what he's doing and defend that space against the other large males, even when they're really not that close to it. He's about the only one that I see going that extra, not extra mile, but like extra 5 miles to make sure that none of the other big males get there. Do you see that?
I do see that as well. And I think that may be the difference maybe between him and 747. He seems to be a bit like hyper dominant almost.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to, I want to remind you, and I want to remind you, and I want to remind you that I'm the most dominant bear here, and you need to give me space. He seems to be reminding other bears of that all of the time, even if he's well fed, even if all the other bears are well fed. 747, he's giant, and he gets to go where he wants to go most of the time just because he's so large. But I don't really see him very often singling a bear out, looking them in the eye and saying, I'm going to displace you right now. It happens once in a while, but not nearly as much.
Exactly. You know, because you'll see 856 with his back to the island behind him somehow smell, hear, I don't know what, but just turn around and then lunge downriver after Lurch to chase him away.
Especially
and he's
after
not even close. And it's like those two have this grudge that goes back to the old neighborhood or something. It's just really strange sometimes.
He's east side, he's west side. I don't know what it is, but yeah, but 856 definitely seems to single out 814 more often than a lot of other bears. And again, we don't really know. It's something that we'd have to
love to
ask
get
them.
inside their brains. And as
Yeah.
Troy said, they don't do surveys very well for us. So we'll never know why, but I do think it's fascinating to see how he will forsake eating in order to defend that space sometimes, because he'll stop, turn around, chase the other bears out of there, and then go back to eating. But I guess in the big picture it pays off, because they don't challenge you, and then you can maybe over time get more fish, even if it costs you one every now and then.
And yeah, I mean, there's really dominant bears are so large that if they miss a fish, it's probably not a big deal, because they can just go back to their favorite fishing spot at another point in time.
Yeah, with the percentage of calories lost in that one fish versus what they're able to get over the course of the summer from being dominant, yeah, it really does pay off. And of course, then there's the whole other side of dominance, and that hierarchy is access to females too.
Definitely, definitely. And last year, 856, I mean, he was pursuing females for a long, long time. Did the same thing this year.
Yep.
Got to take advantage of that moment where you're at the top of the hierarchy.
When you're in your prime and you have a chance to successfully breed, you try to breed as much as you possibly can. I should have mentioned, I'm looking off here periodically because I've got a computer just off screen here.
I thought it was just because you're absent-minded.
I'm shifty.
Okay.
Just shifty-eyed. And I'm just monitoring the other cams, because if we see something interesting happening, since we're not out at the falls and we're not at the lower river, we can switch to the different location, and we can try to comment on what we're seeing. And we've got our radios on a little bit too, so maybe we can hear somebody saying, oh my gosh, it's so-and-so with cubs, and then we can switch to it. Right now it looks to be pretty quiet and pretty wet in all of them, all of the views right now. But that's what I'm looking at when I look over to the side here. We also have our mobile camera, so if something comes around here, we can switch over to that, and one of us can follow it. Probably Mike will follow, and I'll sit here and mash on the keyboard and try to make things work. But that's what I'm doing when I look over here.
And we do have a few questions in our queue. I think one of the basic questions that probably we should answer is about the hierarchy and where certain bears sit in it. And actually,
well, should we talk about hierarchy first? Because I think sometimes there's a misconception that it's like a single line of hierarchy with bears, and that it's not so much that this bear dominates this bear and then that bear dominates another one and another one. It's like a loose pyramid structure where you might have one or two bears, or one that's at the very top and a cluster of them just underneath that, and then further down. So at the top right now would be who again?
856.
856, still probably the top. At the bottom, who would it be?
It would be very small subadult bears that are probably 2.5.
Like first year subadults.
Yeah, 3.5 years old.
Yep.
500 last year, if you were familiar with that bear, and she's still around right now. She's at the bottom of the hierarchy. Only if there's a smaller subadult that she can pick on. So,
or humans. Sometimes they
humans,
think
yeah.
we're beneath them sometimes.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring that up because talking to people here over the years, I think a lot of visitors are expecting a hierarchy that's more like maybe a wolf pack or something, or they're surprised by the fact that cubs are not at the very bottom. And cubs are higher than subadults because cubs are with their mom, so they gain some of her street cred because they can hide behind her when things get gnarly, and mom can push their way into the places where the other bears are, and they get to go along and tag along with her. Whereas if you're a subadult on your own,
and we're actually seeing Holly and family attaining a position a little bit higher in the bear hierarchy than they would if they were all single bears. Mm-hmm. You look at those two bears. So again, Holly has an adopted cub that's 2.5 years old, so pretty big, and a yearling that's smaller than that. And they sort of work together as a team, and they approach other bears as a group. And sometimes the 2.5-year-old, the adopted bear, he seems to be a little bit more independent than the yearling. So he might approach a single bear and actually try to take that bear's fish. And we've seen that family successfully stealing fish from other bears over the past week. So and that's just, I think, a good example about how females, especially with older cubs, can attain a higher place in the hierarchy just because they work together.
Yeah, it's a loose pack sometimes. Even if it doesn't have the communication structured like a wolf pack would, it has that presence of there's three of them now staring at me. We really saw that back when Flo was here. That like the four of them would come walking down the river, and all the other bears would get out of the way. You always want to play it in slow motion and play like music from Reservoir Dogs, or it's very funny to see them walking down the river at you. I was just looking here at what's on the lower river right now, and there seem to be a number of bears splashing in, or not lower river, in the Riffles area right now. I don't know who's up at the falls at the moment.
But
what's another question?
Yeah, so we were, kind of talking about the hierarchy. We mentioned subadults are at the bottom, very young subadults. We talked about how family groups can sometimes attain a higher place in the hierarchy. But we might want to talk about where all of those other bears fit. It's pretty obvious that big adult males are at the top. Mm-hmm. But what about single adult females? Sometimes people are kind of wondering about, is it, directly related to bear size? Is there something else involved? And maybe we touched on that just a little bit when we were talking about 856 versus 747 at the top of the hierarchy. Because 856 may be a little bit smaller than 747.
But he's so aggressive.
Yes.
He's like Napoleon. He's got to throw his slightly less girth and mass around and back it up with a lot of attitude, whereas, 747 just eats. Eats and protects his little spot when it makes sense to him. But, I don't know. How much of it is size? Because we see 410 pull that off. Female bear, an older female bear, a very large female bear. Does she get to come stand elbow to elbow with the guys at the falls because of her size? She's certainly not aggressive, but she doesn't back down.
Yeah, I think maybe because she's a really big female. And a lot of the other bears have known her for many years. I mean, she's been around since
they were cubs.
Since they were cubs. So they've all grown up around her at Brooks Falls, and they know that she's a big bear, but she tends to just go about her business. And that I think familiarity, that might be one reason why she is permitted to fish so close. Size, and then also her disposition that allows her to sort of sneak in between some of these big adult males.
Well, and she has one other bit of threat that's removed from it because she's not trying to mate with any of the females around there too. So they don't have that,
Oh, sure,
issue to
sure,
overcome.
yeah.
They're not trying to protect, they're actually interested in her. They're not trying to keep her away from the other females that they're courting. But I do think that that's pretty interesting how she'll be out there like elbow to elbow with them, whereas a few other females that will fish the falls tend to really defer to them and get out of the way much more readily than she does.
And what about cubs too? I mean, they have a little bit of a hierarchy of their own, and people might be wondering about that.
Within the litter, for sure.
Yeah.
You'll see in the litter a large cub or a more aggressive cub get in fights and take fish from a smaller, less aggressive sibling. You'll see them sometimes push a smaller sibling off of a teat when they're trying to nurse. There's definitely that inter-litter competition that goes on, and I think sometimes we've seen it where you begin to wonder, like, is the little one that keeps getting pushed away from the food even going to make it? As we've talked about before, they're selfish, and they take care of themselves first and foremost, and you even see that in the litter. But as far as their place in the overall hierarchy, so much of that I think it comes from their mother's place in it.
Yeah, and just like you said, I totally agree that there's a hierarchy within the litters themselves, and then it kind of depends on their age and what mom happens to be doing, and they can maybe attain a little bit of a higher level while they're with mom, but then they plummet to the bottom as soon as she kicks them out
Right.
the next year.
People have asked me about the different sizes, about why are they different sizes, and I think you and I have talked about that before too. And it's believed that they're actually born pretty close to one another, not like some birds where it'll be days apart, where the first one out of the egg has more food and more access to it and is a little bit bigger than the others, and then keeps building on that. But it seems like with bears that it is pretty much at the same time that they're born. So it's a little bit of attitude from the earliest days, and probably a little bit of just genetic building blocks that maybe they are just going to be a little bigger, a little more vigorous, or they're born a little bit larger and a little more vigorous.
And we've been sort of paraphrasing a lot of the questions that we have in the queue, but one more that we haven't really talked about is, how do bears learn to be dominant? Is this nature versus nurture? I mean, maybe we can get back to that debate.
The way many of us learned how to swim, probably somebody just threw us in the pool and let us figure it out. Well, you see, there's lots of fighting that goes on, so that's one way that they learn it. They try something, they get smacked by their mom, they get smacked by their sibling, they get smacked by a strange bear, and that's a lesson that they learn about where they are in that place. But it doesn't always have to be fights, as you know. I mean, we see a lot of scars on them, but we also see a lot of body posturing and language that is that something that their mothers teach them, or do bears just know about cowboy walking?
I imagine it has to be a little bit of both. I mean, they're so smart that they know if I do this thing, then maybe it'll give me, this will happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm convinced that bears can have if-then thoughts. Maybe it's not as complex as maybe what we're running through our mind, but if I go to the falls and I fish here and I stand still, then the fish will come to me. They don't need to run around in circles the whole time.
Well, we definitely saw Lefty learn that.
Yes. Yeah.
Like in a short period of time, he went from being like the cat chasing the laser pointer to actually being a little more focused. Well, stealing was in the middle there and being kind of a bully for a while, it seemed like, but then he moved on to at least trying to fish like the other bears. But as far as how they learn their place in it, I don't know that I've ever read that before. Probably, I mean, when you think probably some trial and error, and this worked, and that didn't work, then I got the scar to prove it. And I should have read the yawning and the jaw popping.
Yeah, I mean, because you'll see bears try to steal fish from other bears repeatedly, and they'll target the same bear. They may ignore other bears that they can't get the fish from. So 775 Lefty, for example, first night he showed up, he tried to steal a fish from 856.
How'd that turn out?
And that didn't turn out too well for him. 856 dropped the fish, but he backed off 755 pretty quickly. And 755 has not tried that again with that bear. He has tried it with other bears, though, like 410. I think he's stolen several fish from 410. So if a bear learns the tricks of the trade, hey, I can go and I can pick on this little one and I can get food repeatedly from this bear, it's going to keep on doing that. So I think just like with people, I mean, humans have the genetic programming to stand upright and walk, and we can talk. bears also have genetic programming that allows them to behave in certain ways, show, posture in certain ways, so they can attain a higher place in the hierarchy. And they are smart enough to remember what works and what doesn't. So again, if it's a good thing, they're going to keep on trying it. If it's a bad thing, they're going to keep on avoiding.
And they don't have to get rewarded every time, which is one of the traits of bears that can get them into trouble. If they wander into a town, whether it be King Salmon or Naknek or some town outside of Glacier or West Yellowstone, if they wander into the town and they get food once or they get some sort of reward once, they might try it again, and they don't have to get rewarded the next time or even the next time or the next time. If it's just an infrequent reward, that's enough for a bear, because their whole life revolves around trying to exploit different parts of this environment continually, whether it's for sleep or for play or for food. And as long as they get a reward at some point, it may be worth it for them, and they'll weigh the balance of, is it worth trying to steal a fish when I only get it 40% of the time? Not saying they do that math, but yeah, they're working out the economy of it all the time. And it's amazing to watch that. It's been neat to see Lefty sort of change his strategy. It's, it's neat to see Scaredy Bear over the years branch out and try new things.
And how he's become more dominant.
Yeah.
He got his nickname, if you're not familiar with that bear, when he was a young subadult bear, and that was before I was here. I think you might have been here then. And I guess he just ran from everything.
His shadow. He would run from everything.
And now he's a big adult male, and he can kind of hold his own at the falls in many places. So that's a shift as they habituate to each other, but they also attain size, and they're more comfortable sort of standing their ground and defending access to food if they need it. But what about, and maybe that's a good segue to talk about with the next question here. What is the prime age for a bear to really be dominant? And this is kind of in the context of 634. If he stays around, could he be a dominant bear? But we actually think that he's kind of at the age where he's probably attaining his greatest size.
Well, I think, you'd have to look at all the bears, or a lot of bears, to figure out when the peak was, and look at, there's a bunch of variables. You'd have to look at breeding, the ability to successfully court a female and breed with her, as well as not being displaced. And
still
it still says we're streaming here.
Okay.
Just kidding, there's somebody typing. No. They said lost the feed.
Okay, there might be a little bit of a delay.
Just kidding, it's back.
It
It's
takes
back.
about,
Okay.
sorry about that. It takes about 45 seconds or so, I think, from the time our feed gets dropped until it comes back. Maybe we should take this moment, since we have an unnatural technological break here, to remind everybody who we are. My name is Roy Wood, and I'm the Chief of Interpretation at Katmai National Park and Preserve.
And my name is Mike Fitz, and I'm the Media Ranger here at Katmai. And today we're talking about dominance, the hierarchy, where bears fit into some of those aspects of the bear world, and what you can look for on the cams to try to figure out who's who and where they sit in that hierarchy, because that really does determine how bears can survive in this environment. Each one of these bears has to deal with their own place in the hierarchy. And if you're a big adult male, you can sit on top and get a lot of advantages that are associated with being on top of the hierarchy. If you're a very small, young subadult bear on your own for the first time, you might have to fight for a place and fight for access to food, because those other big bears are going to displace you really easily. So we've been talking about those different things over the past half hour.
And I think the point where well, actually, before I get to that, if you'd like to ask us questions, go to explore.org's website, just in case you're watching this directly on YouTube or on some other venue. Go to explore.org's website, and at the bottom of the page, beneath the video and beneath all the links to the other wonderful cams that Explore has, there's a section where you can chat with one another and you can chat with us. If you post your questions in that area, Tess, who's just off camera over here, will read them. She types them into Skype, sends them over to our iPad here, and we try to incorporate them into our conversation, and sometimes just directly try to answer them, especially if we're getting a little bit behind. We are at about the halfway point. How are we doing on numbers of questions?
Let's see here.
Like
1,
2,
2, 3,
right?
4, 5, 6. Well, we got about 7 questions so far.
Okay,
So
we're right on
yeah,
schedule, and
yeah.
I think what I was talking about, or what we were going to demonstrate before I, it's frozen, but you.
Oh, okay. We got
Sound with Cubs,
Mom
yeah.
and Cubs at the falls.
If you're looking at the Falls cam right now, ours is frozen, our view of it, and hopefully you are seeing a sow with cubs. Or just cubs right now.
And I can't quite see from a distance. It could be 435s and Cubs, but I can't see across the screen. It is. Okay, we're getting a nod
get
of the
a
head
thumbs
from
up
somebody else who knows
in
those
the
bears
peanut
well.
gallery.
So, yeah, we were talking about if we were both in the river.
Yeah, so we talked about if you can observe some of this hierarchy, and you can begin to make notes about who's displacing who, because you can certainly see if one of us is fishing the jacuzzi area and the other one, like if I'm fishing the jacuzzi area and Mike comes up and I leave, that should tell you that he's higher up than I am, and he's displaced me. That's where I wanted to be. I defer to him and I move and I go someplace else. That's a real obvious one. But I think those fights that sometimes erupt, even if they don't erupt in full-blown fisticuffs, I think those can be sometimes misleading to people, because if you and I are in a fight and we're maybe smacking one another, or maybe just growling at one another, or maybe just yawning and doing the posturing like that, and then I turn and walk away, who won that?
It's the bear that walked away. And that often is not something that it's not obvious, I guess.
It's, I'm done with you. I'm out of here.
You're
And
gonna
I turned my back on you. That's how sure I am that I've beaten you in our little display.
Yeah, unless it's over like a specific fishing spot and that bear turns and starts to fish. If it's over a female, he might start to follow the female, but sometimes we'll see this a lot with 856. He'll go over to 747 or 814 Lurch, and he'll make a beeline straight to them. He'll get up in their face. His ears will be forward. Their ears will be sort of back on their head. They'll be their heads will be lowered down, more of in a defensive posture. His head will be up high, and then after he seems like he's gotten his message across, he just turns and walks away. And that's not because he wanted that spot at all, in many cases, especially if it's downstream of the falls. He just wanted to remind those other bears, again, that he's top dog.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, when you see these interactions away from a fishing spot, a female that maybe they're competing for, or another food source, then look for the quote-unquote winner to move away from the subordinate bear in that situation. And that can sometimes be hard to tease out on the cams, but that's something to pay attention to.
Well, we're definitely seeing on the falls cam, Holly, well, now she's gone, but Holly and her maybe confidence that comes from having the whole little mini pack behind her, that she's spending more time at the falls this year than she did in last year. How much of that is having just more heartbeats in her group, 2 cubs with her, and how much of it is her willingness to bring the larger cubs up here as opposed to the like the tiny cubs last year.
Yeah, and I don't remember ever seeing her up here with spring cubs.
And I don't either.
Yeah, so I mean, bears do change their behavior depending on the situation. I think that's a good example. 409 is another bear. Bead nose, she fishes the lip a lot when she's single. I don't remember seeing her up here with spring cubs. I don't know if you do either.
And then 402?
And 402
Just
comes here for all the time. with
whenever,
spring cubs,
yeah.
So it depends.
Putting
it
them
depends
at great peril, according to a lot of people watching around the world. Like
But-
somebody talk some sense into her and make her go somewhere else.
When you're looking at these females coming up here, though, they may not be, particularly high at in the hierarchy. They may not be able to hold a really good fishing spot up at Brooks Falls, but hunger is their motivation. Calories are their motivation. He's getting close.
He's getting close.
And I think
this was fall though.
Yeah, and I think in the fall he might be that way. He's a giant bear. So some bears just don't get as big as others. But along those lines of talking about individual bears and where they fit into the hierarchy, people are wondering, how long can bears be dominant? We had a bear here for a long, long time, number 24, who was dominant for, what was it? It was something like 10 years, I think. I think when
it was a long time.
Yeah.
There's a risk with being the dominant bear. There's something to be said for being a couple of notches down and just being big enough to displace, because you don't get in fights. And I think we see some of the larger aggressive bears really suffer from their frequent fighting. I mean, how much of Lurch's head is missing? He got a chunk of skin torn off. He lost his ear. He had some other, either organ or muscular injuries or joint injuries that were causing him to limp. And that's really gotta shorten that. If you aim for the peak, you can't be there for that long. Whereas Diver was over 30 years old, or believed to be over 30 years old, and he didn't get in fights with people. He just moved on, fished another spot.
Yeah, you're taking a risk when you're
Yeah.
big like that. So, bears live risky lives anyway. So if you're a bear, that's up at the top of the hierarchy, you're competing with other males. If you're willing to challenge another male, you gotta back it up. You gotta walk the walk. So you just can't, you can't always outbluff another
Right.
competitor. If you download our Bears of Brooks River Bear ID book, there's a link in the more info section or about section on Explore.org's page, or you can go to the ebook section on Katmai's website, and you can download that book. And there's a video. I forget which bear I put it in. It's either under number 24 or number 864. And that's in the chapter of Bears No Longer Seen. So we're talking about BB, we're talking about Norman. But there's a video of a really intense fight on one of those Bears pages where those two came together. And after that fight, and to make a long story short, number 24, who was dominant for a long, long time, maybe 10 years or more here at Brooks River, and that fight happened in 2007, we hardly ever saw him again.
Right.
Like, we saw him once the next year, and that was it. So we don't know if he just decided to go to a different spot. We don't know if he was injured in another fight, but he wound up getting into a confrontation with a competitor that was willing to challenge him and willing to take him on. And they got in a really knockdown, drag-out fight. Sometimes you see scuffles on the cams, and it
This
lasts
is
for
nothing like that.
5 seconds. And this was a really intense fight. So a bear like 856 has to be willing to take those risks.
And then, interestingly, after that was sort of the end of BB's reign here, Norman's reign wasn't very long either, because he was, maybe just another couple of years, right, that he was seen and only infrequently.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, there was some bear that looked like him that
I know
showed
you
up.
thought maybe last year you saw him.
I'm not going to say it's him, but it looked a lot like him. So I was like, oh, I wonder if he's still around. But yeah, we really
possible.
didn't. Yeah, we didn't really see him after that. And what about Otis? It seems like he's number one cam favorite, but was he ever a dominant bear?
I don't recall him ever being dominant. In fact, I always thought of Otis as just kind of old, sort of past his prime. And then when I first looked at how old he wasn't that old when I thought that, because he did seem to be kind of pushed around, and but he does very well for himself when he just goes off to his office and fishes. But yeah, I don't. Did you ever look through any of Tammy's stuff and see that he was really dominant? Because
not.
I mean, that would have been hard to even try to assert yourself under BB.
Yeah.
Because BB would clear out the place just like 856 does. Probably worse than 856.
And I think bears like number 24 BB and One Toe in the past, and there was a few others as well before we had live cams here. They were definitely at the top of the hierarchy, so they were holding the positions like 856 and 747 are now. And Otis was in the mix, but he was kind of maybe another tier
He's the
down.
tortoise.
Yeah.
and the tortoise and the hare.
He was-
those guys are gone.
He was a big bear. I remember him coming in, and he was very walrus shaped.
Yeah.
He kind of had a thinner, kind of a thick neck, but he was very walrus or pear shaped. And he would go to the jacuzzi, and a lot of those younger bears would defer to him when he waltzed on in. 747, for example, my first few summers, wanted to fish a jacuzzi, but Otis was much bigger than him at that time, and he would just waltz up, and 747 would see him, and he'd say, "Oh, I don't want to deal with that," and he'd move out of the way.
Yeah.
And now things have flipped, where 747 will easily push Otis out of the jacuzzi. So he probably was never at the very top of the hierarchy, but he was kind of mid-level for adult males,
Yeah.
just based on his size. But we also didn't see him stealing fish or targeting other bears and trying to displace them very often. What about, bears fighting in the hierarchy? Have we ever seen 2+ bears gang up on another bear? I certainly haven't.
Well,
haven't
the other
seen
night
that.
you shot that video
I did?
with the sow and the little cub.
Oh, the sow and the cub. I forgot about that. I was like, what? Okay. That was interesting to see. And I think
Have you posted that video?
I have not. No.
We should try to get that up there for people
Yeah.
to see, because I know some people on the cam saw it. Well, no, actually, I don't know if they saw it.
I'm not sure where the cam was looking at that point in time, but yeah, I got some. There was a mother with the single spring cub that people have been seeing. The spring cub that likes to stand underneath her a lot. They were coming up near Brooks Falls, and another bear got close, another adult female, and the cub actually, you could see that he was like, "What's this other bear doing?" So it actually was right next to mom, like right at the front of mom, and almost in front of her. Trying to, charge the other bear,
Yeah.
and it's cute, I guess. But mom is also like snapping at the cub, like, "You need to get behind me because I need to defend you."
Right.
But the cub was actually right up next to mom, like doing the exact
Throwing
same
punches
thing.
and-
Yeah, the same thing that mom was doing.
Have you seen
So,
that YouTube video of cutest cub attack ever?
I did
or
see
cutest
that.
bear attack ever? You should YouTube that, Google that. It's pretty adorable as well.
So, but as far as
yeah,
like
I've never
older,
seen
older
any
bears,
older
yeah.
bears do that. That would involve an awful lot of cooperation and willingness to share in the spoils, whatever they be, if it's the fishing hole or the food. And frankly, I don't see that really being in the nature of bears to work together as a team, other than the family groups who will sometimes do it, but work together as a team to do that. I'm just trying to think of some other. Even if we take it and we, like, do they ever... Well, you know what we have seen? It's not really fighting, though, but we have seen the subadults running the river together to sort of drive the fish into the shallows. Whether they did that, like, I got a plan, come with me, this is how we're going to get fish, or if they just happened to run together and discovered it on their own, and it worked one time, so they tried it again. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
We used to see them down below or by the cut bank. But as far as fighting goes, I have never seen that. And
Neither have I. I think they tend to just let two bears duke it out, and they don't want to necessarily get involved because they don't have friends. I mean, you might look at number 32, for example, Chunk, and number 89, Backpack, and how they play with one another. But I bet in just a few years, when those
Yeah.
bears get much bigger and they try to attain higher places in the hierarchy, they're not going to be so friendly with
Right.
one another. Even 814 used to play with Ted. Even my first summer here, I saw them in the lower river just wrestling with one another for hours.
yeah, I've got some great video of those guys playing too from years ago.
So yeah, they even though I think that the familiarity with one another and maybe the playfulness that some of these bears show towards one another, I'm not sure that carries into subsequent years because again, they're always thinking about themselves. Going back to the selfishness that we had mentioned before. And people are wondering about number 32 and his temperament. From what we've seen, does 32 seem to have the ability to become a dominant bear? I mean, he's certainly gotten a lot bigger. He was this pudgy little subadult in 2007. That's what I remember him. And I can even go back and look at pictures I have of him from that year and thinking, look at that little bear. He's just kind of chunky, and now he's getting pretty big.
I don't know, and I can't remember, were we talking about this before before we went live here? But 747, never in a million years would I have thought that he would still be around even, because he was just kind of a goofy subadult and young adult.
I don't really think there's any behavioral characteristics that we can see in these younger bears that say this one is definitely going to be the next 856 or the next 747. Both of those bears were just, like you said, goofy young males, and they would be at the falls and they would try to fish, and
Yep.
maybe they weren't good at it. Maybe other bears displaced them an awful lot, but we never had any indication that they were going to be the
And-
top of the hierarchy.
And that's one reason why we try to resist giving them names, because they'd all have names like, you know, Goofy and you know, funny, I mean, silly names, because they're all kind of awkward, try anything, mess up a lot subadults. And so if we gave them if we made a point of trying to give them all names when they were really young, we'd be way off base. I mean, who knows what Lurch would be called if
Yeah, and you know the biggest, baddest bear that you've ever seen was once a tiny, cute little cub. So you're watching those spring cubs on the camera. The biggest, they have the potential to be those giant bears. So,
Yep.
you know, I don't think there's anything, you know, that we can really say with 32's behavior or size that indicates that he will become a very dominant bear. But just based on his pattern of growth and getting bigger each year, we can make a reasonable assumption that he'll be at a fairly high place in the hierarchy. But exactly where, I'm not sure we can
My
predict
money's
that.
on 503 Cub Adult.
Oh, okay.
Just because I know we were talking about this before the cams went live, but that's a bear that was not only tough enough and persistent enough to survive being abandoned, but smart enough to convince an adult female bear with her own cub to not kill him on sight when he got too close to her cub. And you know, I don't know what he used, what sort of posturing, what sort of manipulation he used to win her over, but that ability to survive, then the ability to get yourself adopted, and then, you know, he's big. I mean, he's really growing, and having that extra help with Holly, I don't know. It's, if anybody's getting a head start, it's him at this point. But I'm sure I'll be wrong.
And I think we should look for.
It'll be fun to watch.
If he does return next year, which may or may not happen. Even if he,
this may be it.
even if he's still alive, he may disperse because subadult males, they tend to disperse pretty widely. But if he comes back, it'd be really interesting to watch how his behavior shifts and how it changes. Because, you know, right now he has mom at his back protecting him, but then he'll be, again, at the very bottom of the hierarchy, and he'll have to face a lot of competition on his own without the assistance of his mother.
We've got about 9 minutes left.
Okay.
How we doing on questions?
We're doing okay. I think we're both a little long-winded today. I don't think we've gotten.
Well,
to
we like
quite-
talking about the big boys. This is why we come up to the falls
Yeah.
every night. You know, even when it's pretty lousy weather, we're typically up here, and you know, we get a lot of questions about it. We both really enjoy this. It's exciting to talk about this as opposed to, you know, June when bears are eating grass.
Definitely.
So-
This is prime time at the falls. I mean, that's why I'm up here almost every night.
Yep.
And I tried to get up here last night and couldn't because of a bear jam, and then other things happened, but we won't get into that right now. We have one more question in our queue for the time being. We'll try to answer a few more before we call it quits at 5. So if you have a few more questions for us, please post them in the chat, and Tess will look through those and try to give them to us on the iPad here. But one of the questions that we do have in the queue is, does the close proximity of each other, and they're talking about the bears, of course, in Brooks cause more or less fighting, more or less encounters?
That's an interesting one. You know, so the reason that they come to Brooks Falls is because of the concentration of food. These large seasonal aggregations of bears typically revolve around salmon or berries. Well, those aren't even large aggregations. Or like on the coast of Katmai, when they're out on the mud flats, they sometimes get close to one another when they're digging for clams, and other coastal locations. They'll get close to one another when there's a dead whale that's grounded, and they feed on that. And so when they come together in these groups, they have to give up some of their animosity towards their fellow bear if they want to engage in that very easily obtained food source, whether it's the salmon or the beached whale or the clams. But if they're out on their own, they're a little more protective of their food. So I don't know. That's a long way to go to restate all of that to say I really don't know. I mean, what do you think? I mean, we see a lot of fights here, but because there are a lot of bears here. But how much more would it say a bear out in Yellowstone fight over, a squirrel's cache of nuts, and we're not there to see it because they're spread out pretty far. I don't know.
It's a hard question to answer. I believe that, if you put more bears in enclosed spaces, just like with people, there's probably going to be a higher chance of those aggressive encounters with one another and have fights. But bears that live even in populations that are really dispersed and don't really have these highly concentrated food sources like we do at Katmai, like a place such as Yellowstone or Denali, they still have a hierarchy. Adult males are still on the top.
Fight.
They still fight over the resources that they need. Yellowstone, I think, when they had the garbage dumps there, the grizzly bears there would go down to the dumps, and there was a hierarchy with the grizzly bears at the dumps at that time.
But that was another concentrated food source.
And that was a concentrated food source. Even today, though, in other places where maybe you don't have these big runs of salmon and waterfalls where bears gather at, an animal carcass, that can be a situation that attracts many bears.
Right.
So you can still have those situations where bears are encountering one another and they may want to fight. But they have these social adaptations where that allows them to avoid these encounters. They don't need to claw each other in the face every time they look at one another, because they know who's who. They can remember one another from on a daily basis, from season to season. They have the body posturing that allows them to decide whether it's worth it to pursue escalating this situation or not. So it's maybe a little bit of both. Maybe the close proximity could confer more fights in between them. But they have that.
Basically, there's work for someone to do. A bear sociologist could really discuss or study this and let us know.
Okay, so we just got a few more questions. So thanks for posting those. We'll try to get to these before our chat ends.
4 minutes.
What about adult females like 409 bead nose? Where does she really fit in the hierarchy? We kind of talked about that with 410, but what about 409? To me, it seems like she's kind of at that same level as 410. She's a big female. They don't get much bigger than 410 and 409.
Right. I know she seems to. Maybe it's because she wants to fish that one spot all the time, that maybe she gets pushed around a little bit more than 410 does.
Perhaps, yeah. It's hard to say. I think those big adult females can hold that position in the hierarchy. But with, she's gotten fish stolen from her, and I think that's just because certain bears have learned to target her more than anything else. It's maybe not that she's less willing to yield that fish. In fact, sometimes she seems to want to defend it, maybe even more than 410. But maybe she's just at a place where bears can easily get to her. If 410's fishing in between 747 and 814 on the far side of the falls, 775 isn't going to come down and try to steal that fish necessarily, because he has to run the gauntlet of those other big males. But if 409's on the lip and on her own, she's maybe a little bit more vulnerable to another bear coming over and stealing, because there's not other bears around her that those big, like someone like Lefty would have to avoid. Mm-hmm. So big adult females, they're going to be below adult males in the hierarchy, but they're still going to be able to attain a fairly high spot. Well, what about siblings? And this is maybe a question I'm not sure if we're going to necessarily be able to answer. We can at least speculate. We do like speculating about the bears sometimes. It's kind of part of the fun.
Usually off camera, though, we speculate about the bears.
And the last two questions are kind of related to one another. Will Holly's adopted cub remember his sister when they part and try not to hurt her? And what about siblings? Do they end up showing tolerance in later years in life?
Well, we have that interesting video that was shot about 10 years ago, that was shot from the lower river of the sibling sows that met and seemed to have their little play date. I don't remember the numbers on them.
I think I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember the
But
specifics.
there seems to be in some cases some recognition and some acceptance or tolerance of relatives, but I don't know that I would expect him to, always be nice to his adopted sister over the years. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years from now we didn't see them mating.
Well,
sometime.
he's not. I mean, he's not really being.
He's
nice
not
to her
really. Yeah, he's not
next to her
genetic
right now.
either.
I mean, he doesn't share fish with her.
Right.
He takes fish from mom and then hoards it for himself. So right now he's not being, nice to his sibling. Again, it's going back to the hierarchy amongst the litter. He is certainly more dominant in that family than the yearling cub because he's much larger. He's a bit more aggressive because of that size. So in later years, I don't think that he's going to necessarily play nice with his younger sister. But bears do remember one another into adulthood. We don't have the two Wayne brothers here right now. 868's been around a lot. But number 83, who's his suspected brother, is actually more dominant than 868. We've seen him push 868 out of fishing spots before. The selfish nature of bears, they don't give each other breaks. They're definitely going to look out for themselves.
Sure would be nice to know what they're thinking. if they, how much do they recognize, if there's anything going on there. But another one of those things that I'm sure we'll probably never know.
So I don't think we quite got the 20 questions this time.
How'd we do, Tess? Did we get to close to 20?
Yeah.
Okay. Tess says yes, so good. All right. Success.
I feel like we need to put Tess on camera for being so helpful. She doesn't really want to, but Tess is our intern, and she's going to be leaving us very soon to go out to the coast to do some work there. Do you want to come stand up here with us just for a second? You might trip over the cords through there, so be careful. Did you get the Legos?
Yeah,
so this is Tess. I don't know if everybody can hear you very well, so we'll sort of lean in. You want to tell everybody where you live?
I am from Igiugig, which is 50 miles north of Brooks Camp. This is like my backyard.
And how many people live in Igiugig?
There's about 70 people who live in Igiugig, 70 plus, but it's like here, we get a lot of tourists going there to fish.
Yeah, lots of fishing.
Yeah.
And you're going to school in the fall, right?
Yes. I'll be going to school in Anchorage.
Yep. And she's been a great help this year with our social media efforts and especially Twitter, right? That's been the one that you've mostly, or is it Facebook that you've mostly been doing?
A little bit of
both, actually.
A little bit of everything, yeah.
And then helping us out on some of the chats and taking pictures for us and going on lots of great adventures. And her next great adventure is going out to the coast. And hopefully she'll give us some tweets and write up some entries for our blog while she's out there having a different Katmai experience. But we wanted to thank her for coming along. And she's really embarrassed right now. Will probably kill us both later. But thanks. Thank you, Tess, for a great summer.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. We hope to do something else tomorrow and another chat perhaps on Friday morning. Oh,
One more
almost
thing.
forgot. Almost forgot.
There you go. I knocked it off.
We wanted to give another plug for the Lego National Park kits. We'll stick them in here close again so you can see. I know some of you, it's not really focusing. We talked about them the last time, one of the last chats we had, and the numbers on the website jumped up about 900 or so. And I can't say that we're entirely responsible for that, but we know there are a bunch of you out there that will watch this either live or in rerun. And if you haven't gone to the Lego site and announced your support for these Lego kits, please do. There's the possibility that sometime in the next year, if there's enough support, enough interest in this, that you could buy a Lego Brooks Falls kit with park rangers and bears and the waterfall, and it would be very cool, I think. And they've got to get 10,000 people that say they're interested in it before Lego will consider. And last count, we were at about 5,000. So we're halfway there. I think the goal of the creator, who is a park ranger, is to get these looked at by Lego and approved by Lego in time to sell them during the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service, which is next summer is the 100th anniversary, and we're in our year-long celebration right now. So take a look at those. If you know a Lego lover, and who isn't a Lego lover, voice your support for that. and check our website, and we'll be maybe doing naturalist notes tomorrow.
I would probably, yeah, we'll try that again. We'll try to do naturalist notes from the falls where I narrate the action that I happen to see. So as long as the weather cooperates and there's no bears that prevent me from walking up here, which sometimes happens.
Which is what happened last night.
Then I will be up at Brooks Falls at 8 p.m. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's some more cubs. Sounds like bawling for fish out there. I know that's late for a lot of people on the East Coast, especially, but it's a good time of the day to watch bears here at Brooks River. And Explore.org, they'll find folks there that they'll get a replay on their YouTube channel for people to watch in the future. So please join me for Naturalist Notes tomorrow night at 8 p.m.
And then sometime Friday, don't know the time yet, but we'll get that figured out here shortly and post it up for another question and answer kind of chat. Not sure what the subject will be. Maybe if you have an idea for one, you can pass it along in the chat area on the website, and we'll talk about that on Friday. But until then, thanks for joining us. Have a good evening.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye.
We'll talk to you later.